Hi everyone. Hi Molly. So my name is Jen Unwin. I'm actually a doctor of clinical psychology by background, but I've now kind of retired, sort of, from the NHS. I worked in the National Health Service in the UK, so I'm kind of retired from that. And a part of the reason that I did that was just to have the freedom to work and kind of learn more about the whole issue of food and sugar addiction. And so that happened like three years ago, that I've been focusing on that. Yeah, and I'm a food addict working on recovery, let's say.
Yeah, aren't we all, it seems like.
Yeah, gotta keep working. That's something I've just kind of really understood more recently. I think I always knew that intellectually, but I think I know that more now, like at a deeper level, that it's every day forever, which is fine.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the spirit of reducing stigma and just spreading the word that this is a real thing, that there are people out there who are going through this process, would you mind kind of sharing your story, what it was like before you got into recovery?
Absolutely. It'd be my absolute pleasure. It's great to tell it, yeah, for that reason. And also personally, I think it just helped to keep retelling one's own story, because for so many decades, I think so many of us kind of denied the reality of the story, or tried to have another narrative around it, or tried all kinds of ways to solve it. So if just one person hears, any of these interviews that you're doing and recognizes themselves in that, and then can see the whole thing in a different way, I think that that'll be good enough. So my story, I think, is reasonably typical, but we're all different. Mine was really, looking back, I have no memory of not being obsessed with food. I'm thinking it was kind of the best thing in life, really. From quite young, if I could get my hands on something sweet, or somebody gave me some sweets as a present, or if I had any money, I'd nip down the sweet shop if I could, or if there was, if it was meal time, so that was my favorite time of day. So yeah, I don't really remember not thinking about food. And I've told this before on the podcast, but one of my earliest food memories is of being sent to Sunday school, and we made I don't remember anything else about Sunday school apart from this one week that we made cheese scones and took them home, and we were allowed to eat them, and they're like still warm or covered in butter. I hope it's all right to talk about food on this on the show. Yeah,
That's what we're here for. Reducing stigma.
I must have been 4, let's say 4, 3.5, 4, something like that. Yeah, so I remember that. So all was kind of good, really. I got to the age of, when I was 6, there was like a really sad thing happened in the family. My dad's younger brother, and he had one brother, and he'd already lost his dad in tragic circumstances when he was 16. So him and his brother were quite close, and his brother was such a lovely guy, so funny, and I remember him. He died tragically in a car accident. So it's my dad's brother. And I just remember my dad kind of doing a very British thing. He locked himself in his bedroom, didn't come out for about 3 days, but then when he came out, he never mentioned it again. And looking back, that's just so heartbreaking. So I think at the time, obviously, you embody that sadness without having a way of talking about it. It still upsets me now. And obviously, so my dad was adorable, but he was very British, stiff upper lip, as you can tell from that story. And my mum was the same. They were sort of brought up, during the war, you just got on with stuff. So they just got on with stuff, and they didn't really talk about feelings or emotions or anything. So that's when I was 6. And then when I was about 10 or 11, my dad was diagnosed, as I know now, with a renal carcinoma, which is obviously really serious, and he could have died back in the day. I didn't know that at the time. I knew he was going to hospital for operations and things like that. And obviously my poor mother was very distracted as well, because she wasn't the wage earner, he was, and she was probably thinking, you know, she was probably stressed to high heaven. I know she was, looking back again. So there was a reasonable amount of kind of tension, and yet not talked about, and sort of yeah, we as I say, me and my brother didn't really know what was going on. There was obviously as well a sort of absence of emotional support for us, in a sense, because both of them were very preoccupied with, quite rightly, what was going on. So it's not a criticism of them at all. But at that time, I started sort of sneaking food, and bake. I loved baking, obviously, like many of us do. So I was old enough by then. My mum was a very good cook. Looking back, she was totally a food addict. She used to lose weight and gain weight, and you know, sometimes we were having desserts, sometimes we weren't, depending on where she was in what was going on with her. And she loved to bake, so she'd already taught me to bake, and I loved cooking. So I would go to the kitchen, and I, with the excuse of kind of baking something, making something, but then would, you know, eat half of the mixture before it went in the oven, and the rest of it when it came out of the oven, and would amuse myself in that way. But then would also, you know, in addition to that kind of openly cooking and eating things, if nobody was around, I'd sneak to the kitchen and find stuff in the baking cupboard, or make little concoctions out of sugar and butter, or condensed milk. I don't know if you have that in the States. It's like really sweet milk.
Sweet, thick, comes in a can. Oh yeah.
Yes. So I would just open a can of that and basically eat the whole can. I mean, it was that thing of, it was never enough. Or I'd make hot milk but add sugar and add raisins and add, you know, everything sweet. And it was, you know, it was, even when I'd done that or had like 8 pieces of toast, or it was kind of never enough. Anyway, so the obvious upshot was, by the time I was 12, I was overweight, quite overweight. And back in the day in the UK, there wasn't a lot of childhood overweight or obesity. So I was at that time the only girl. I went to a girls' school. I was the only girl in my class who was overweight. Everyone else was a normal weight. And so then you start to think there's something a bit odd about you. So I was very much I was quite extroverted as a child, so I was like a class clown kind of thing. So that was me in my early teenage. And then of course what happens is I think my mom was obviously trying to help me in whatever way she could. She obviously thought this wasn't going in a very good direction. So from teenage, her and I would go on diets together. And some of them were really grim. I remember a few, like the egg and grapefruit diet. Don't know if you had that in America. Oh yeah, egg and grapefruit diet. That was all you had, eggs and grapefruit. Or there were loads of funny things like yogurt and celery, and still can't stand celery to this day because of kind of eating so much in those days. But of course that would only ever last a week or two before you can't keep on that kind of regime for long. And she did powders as well. I remember us doing kind of you know, shake replacement meals and all of that. And then so that never did work. And then a girl joined our class who was actually overweight, but unfortunately looking back, I don't know why I'm laughing, looking back, she had problems with eating disorders. So she said, oh, I know how you can lose weight, kind of thing. You just don't eat. So then I learned even more about kind of dieting and restriction from her, but then clearly she was still overweight. She had, I think she was more the other way, really. She was more sort of binge eating. So that was a bit of a mess in the teenage years. I did lose weight. I was successful in losing weight because I'm quite a determined person, quite an organized person. So what if I was on some scheme, I could stick to it for a reasonable amount of time and I would lose some weight, and then inevitably something would happen, like Christmas or a holiday or birthday, and you just can't stick to it, and then off we'd go again. And so really that pattern continued without me quite understanding why, all my adult life, till I got to my late 40s. I would lose weight, usually with some sort of low fat scheme, some scheme like Slimming World, Weight Watchers. I could maybe stick it for sort of 6 months or so, would lose a load of weight, and then would sort of pile back on. So it kind of went up and down. In the meantime, really successful career as a psychologist. I love being a psychologist. I work with people with physical health problems, helping with them with coping, quality of life, all of that stuff. I absolutely loved it. Got my doctorate. Just couldn't it just had this one area of my life that I couldn't seem to have any long-term control over, and so that was always a point of I don't know how to put it into words, just a point of sort of cognitive dissonance, really, that I knew a lot about psychology, behavior change and all of that, but could never get a grip of this behavior, however hard I tried, whatever schemes I tried, however much willpower I tried to put into it. Would just kind of, the weight would just go up and down. So I think that does it just affects your self-esteem, really. The whole body image thing, I never know what size I am. Even now, I never know if I'm overweight or underweight. I just can't judge it. I think because I was an overweight child, I have no sense of what would be right, or what's the sort of right body to be in. A few times I had lost a lot of weight through fasting, or kind of just excessive restriction, really. And I'm actually one of those people who really feels good when I do that. So it's sort of, once I was into that zone, there was a danger of just doing it excessively, really. And partly because I knew when I stopped doing it, the weight would go back up. So I thought, if you tend to think, if I go super low, this is weird logic, if my weight goes super low, then I've got a sort of, I've got some wiggle room there. But no, it was always sort of, the body always, as I understand it now, always wants to regain that weight quite rightly, really. So that went on. And then I found about 10 years ago, I was absolutely at rock bottom. I used to get terrible seasonal affective disorder. So in the winter, it was like wading through a trick. I used to dread the winter. In October, I used to kind of think, oh no, the winter's coming, I've got to get through it. I used to feel so lethargic and depressed in the winters. And it got to January and I'd put on weight, and it was just so miserable. Anyway, I found a book called Escape the Diet Trap by Dr. John Briffa. It's still in publication in the UK. He's a British GP. And really it was a book about low carb eating. And so I read this book, and it just made complete sense to me. The whole insulin thing I could understand. He did, I think there's a bit, I need to reread it because I haven't read it since, but I think he does talk about craving and stuff like that. And he talks about sort of normalizing blood sugars, and if you're you can be a fat burner, and if your insulin's high, you can't burn your own fat. And I completely understood all of this. And he explained how to do it. So I just went cold turkey in January. Felt absolutely ghastly for about a week, because obviously I was kind of going from sugar burning to fat burning. But fortunately, in the book, he'd said you will feel absolutely terrible for about a week. So I was kind of, this is working, you know. So I was kind of lying around with these headaches and shakes and everything, because I went from quite high sugar to, you know, to.
Did he give any sort of like idea of how to get through without experiencing it in such an extreme way? Do you remember?
Yeah, I think it is in there about having salt, you know, more salt, you know, because you're going to lose salt, and, you know, take it easy. And so I did all of that. I'm quite a headachy person, so I think I probably had it worse than was the most. I get migraines if I mess around too much with too many things with the diet. So yeah, but then day 8, bing, and the lights came on, and I just felt amazing, energetic, cheerful, not hungry. It's really weird, so interesting. And so of course you kind of think, right, I found, you know, the answer. I found the answer. So, and it obviously was part of the answer. So I got so interested in this whole low carb thing. And as some people will know, and you know, that then what happened was that David saw me do the medicine. My husband's a GP, and he'd seen me obviously all this weight problems over the years, and you know, the weight going up and down. So he was like, you know, here's another scheme. But he saw how well I was really with this, and also he started to, you know, understand the physiology of it and look into it. And so we, after about a year, decided to set up a project in his practice to help patients with type 2 diabetes to go low carb. We ran groups, and I ran the groups, did the motivational stuff, and he did the sort of physiology and the doctor side, and that went amazingly. So that was good, because it sort of it motivated me to stay on track, because we were, you know, we wanted to walk the walk. You know, if we were asking patients to do this, it was important that we both did it. And of course, what's absolutely brilliant is that David's low carb and has been since then, so that makes it so much easier. The children still had Edward at home at the time, so it wasn't, you know, that we could get rid of everything out of the house initially, although now all our 3 children and all our grandchildren low carb keto. So and David's mum, so it's kind of spread through the family slowly. So so I did that for a bit, but it wasn't the whole answer, because it was still totally possible for me to overeat low carbohydrate and keto type foods. Of course, I started doing the kind of low carb baking tricks, you know, with almond flour and coconut flour and stuff like that, and
Erythritol and stevia, right? All the things.
Did that, yeah. Sugar-free gum, you know, Diet Coke, all of these things I had to kind of go over the years. Over these 10 years, I've had to sort of realize. So one of the first things that I really realized I couldn't have in the house was peanut butter. I absolutely could not have that in the house. We would just eat the whole jar if it was in there. So that went off the shopping list. And then, yeah, the sweeteners, the flours, even if they're kind of whole food things like almond flour. Yeah, anything with stevia. It took me ages to give up sweeteners. I mean, years. So in the 10-year journey, I've had to give up sweeteners probably 3 or 4 times, because I'd occasionally just slip back into, on holiday, having something, or, you know, just thinking, oh, I'll just have a sweetener in my coffee as a treat or something, and then just being straight back into it, exactly like it was with the sugar. So yeah, sweeteners, peanut butter, and then more latterly dairy. So cream and cheese and nuts of any kind. I could have a little bit, but it tends to just lead onto more. So I've ended up having, I do, in lots of people's eyes it would look like quite a restricted diet. I'm practically carnivore, really, with occasional low carbohydrate vegetables. I don't have any alcohol, any sweeteners, any nuts, any dairy, 99.9% of the time. And it takes a long time to get there, but it's totally worth it for the peace of mind. That's the thing. It's not just that when I'm eating those things I'd likely be gaining weight because I can't moderate, say nuts or dairy, cheese or whatever. Up to reasonably recently, giving those things up has always been about the weight and try not to have weight gain. But what I've really understood recently on my continuing journey is that the most precious thing about that abstinence is actually the peace of mind. It's not to do with the weight at all. I mean, to be honest, nobody would care. None of the family would care, and your friends wouldn't care if you weighed a stone more or 2 stone more or even 3 stone more. What matters is that when I eat in this very seemingly restricted way, my mind is free to feel good about myself and to focus on just anything else. Just thinking about normal things really, and getting on with life and having the energy to do things without being self-critical or having cravings or being obsessed with body image. All of those things seem to go away the minute I'm abstinent, even though obviously physically I haven't changed radically, but weirdly, so what I've understood more recently is that my body image and self-esteem is so much better when I'm just abstinent. So it's not that I don't see it now that I'm on it's not a diet. I'm just eating different things, and it's really hard to get out of the weight loss mentality. I have to absolutely say that, and I haven't absolutely nailed it yet, but eating for kind of health and vital, so eating meat, eggs, and just occasionally vegetables, but I'm more or less carnivore now, as I say. I seem to do best on that. That's been the game changer, really. Not trying to lose weight, eating enough. So I'm not restricting, so eating enough, but then on the other hand, this is kind of delicate tightrope of not restricting, and because of my whole history, I can overeat, volume eat. So I do a little light self accountability with the weighing scales. If I'm at home, I tend not to bother when I'm out, because most people don't give you a massive portion of meat, so it's hard to overeat meat when you're out at a restaurant, because they just give you a normal portion, or if you're at someone's house. But if I'm at home, I do just weigh what I have. So, but that's I suppose that's in terms of the food side of things anyway, which is only part of it, as we all know.
Right. I mean, you had been saying, okay, so like you've been on this journey for 10 years, it sounds like, well, longer, but this part of your journey and finding the book and going through detox. What do you remember from those early days as far as protecting that abstinence? Like, what was that like then? Like, did you say no to going out to social things? Did you worry about what was going to be fed to you if you went to a friend's house or a family member's house? Like, can you talk a bit about like what that was like then versus how you do it today?
How we do it now? That's such a good question. Let me think back. I mean, I'm sure I did, but I think we quite, because back then I was sort of in a way liberal low carb. It's not so difficult in a restaurant, because you just say, well, I'll have the steak with the salad, or so I think we sort of reasonably soon learn how to do it. And because I've done so many different schemes over the years, most of my friends and family just say to me, oh, you know, what are you eating these days? They're kind of used to me being a little bit that way out. Yeah. And then I think I do still, you know, I do still, so say we've just been to Paris on a holiday, I do still beforehand get a bit, this is easier when I'm at home, you know, being away is going to be a little bit more difficult, but actually it is fine once you're in that mindset. It's been okay actually. So I tend not to eat breakfast, which is usually the most difficult meal to you know, you're usually more tempted by carbohydratey things if you have breakfast in hotels and things like that. Yeah, lunch, I mean, I just try, and we either would go to a shop and buy some meat, some pre-cooked meat, or go to like a steak restaurant or something and choose something like that. And of course in France it's actually quite easy because they're very good on their meat and their fish and everything. Other people's houses, again, but over the years that's got a bit easier. That was a bit difficult initially. Buffets are a massive challenge to me. I'm really triggered by a whole table full of food and how much to have, or yeah, what's kind of okay to have. I think that's often been a difficulty in the past. These days I would normally take something to add to the buffet that I know I could have, and I'd have to be really careful about just having one plateful and then walking away, not sort of hanging around the buffet area. Go and sit in the garden or something like that. If yeah, I mean, it can still be a challenge. Lots of our friends, funnily enough, are now low carb or, you know, or keto, and they know us so well. Even if they aren't, they would understand how we eat. So it's sort of got loads easier. Yeah.
Do you ever, oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, you know, we said it's been 10 years, but I didn't really understand it. I didn't understand about food addiction until about 5 years ago. Yeah, that was a really, understanding it as an addiction was like a massive difference. I heard Bitten do some videos on the Diet Doctor. That's how I kind of came across the idea, and I thought, oh yes, that's me. And I couldn't believe I hadn't put two and two together.
So when you did,
yeah.
But when you did that change what you were doing? I mean, did you end up removing things at that point? Yeah. Then that, okay.
Yeah, totally. And you know, things like the sweeteners, I understood, right, I can't flirt with these things, you know, they need to go on a permanent basis. And also, you know, a bit also explained to me about, you know, I hadn't really heard anyone else say about the nuts and the dairy, which she did, and alcohol. I remember her saying really clearly, you know, well, it's, you know, obviously it works in exactly the same part of the brain. You know, I've never been a drinker, so it's not been difficult to give up alcohol, but I would drink it at social occasions with other people, and then it just but yeah, even 2 days later could make me much more cravey and hungry, and yeah, so the alcohol went as well, thanks to that understanding. And also I gave up caffeine as well, which I hadn't really mentioned, and I don't think everybody has to do this, but A, because I'm a bit headachy, and B, because I had a bit of an addictive relationship with caffeine, that I was always making my coffee stronger and stronger and having more and more of them, and then having to cut down. And that was a sort of pattern that I would go through, because I'd realize it was getting too much, and I'd start getting, you know, like and I'd have to cut it down. So I thought, oh, this is ridiculous, you know, I just need to treat that like everything else, cut that out. So don't have caffeine anymore either. So yeah, so I think you definitely learn definitely 100% learn from mistakes. I mean, I have fallen off the wagon a lot, like everybody, less spectacularly in recent times. You know, I think I always say to people it's a bit like riding a bike. So in the early years I would kind of really crash out and then get back on, and then crash out and take a while to get back on. And now if I have even a little slip, I'm just straight back on now. It's so much more conscious and yeah, more within my conscious control than it was, I would say, over those 10 years, and definitely the last sort of 4 or 5 years.
Yeah. Well, it really sounds like you kind of have this big picture, like you kind of have this, I don't know, vision that's what you're kind of working toward, it sounds like, versus like when it was dieting, right? It was always about the number on the scale, the size on your pants, a specific special event was coming up, right? And then it was like we would get there and then be like, oh, okay, I can go back to doing what I had been doing. Or like you said, like it would work for like a week or two and then something would interrupt. But now it sounds like you have this kind of like, it's more about the journey than the destination, though there is kind of this bigger idea. And so you're just kind of like, okay, well, that didn't work. So it's information, adjust, yes. Keep going.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I think that's right. I think, yeah, no, you've put it really well. I think before I understood it as an addiction, I would think, right, I've lost the weight. Now I'll do that moderation thing that everybody talks about. And now I'll do that maintenance thing that everybody talks about, where you're just really sensible and just have a bit of this and a bit of that. Not understanding that for people like me, that was never, ever going to happen. And I think that's the key bit of information. It'd be so brilliant to get out. Hello, if you're out there and that's you and you've never managed it and you're 48, you're never going to manage it. It's so much easier to be abstinent. And I do remember at the beginning, I don't know if you do, Molly, that I really a sense of grieving when I understood. So I listened to it and I thought, that's right, yes, sugar addiction is a thing. I am going to have to be abstinent. And I was absolutely heartbroken in a way, because like I say, my whole life that had been the highlight. You know, those things have been the highlight of my life, being able to eat those things. And the relationship we have with them is yeah, it's a little bit unusual. And I was, you know, genuinely, it took a while to adjust mentally and emotionally to the idea that I could never eat those things again. And I've definitely seen that with people that we work with, where they actually get worse when you point that out, that it's an addiction and that they're going to have to give it up. And David's the same in his practice. When he talks to some of his patients about that, they disappear for a few months and they turn up after a while and they've put on more weight, or the blood sugars got way worse, and they say, you are right, but I just didn't want to hear that, you know. So I really understand when people have that kind of, oh God, I couldn't, you know, they literally say, I couldn't give up bread.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can. And what you don't realize is that all the ways in which the balance is so much better for doing those things. You can't know that because you've never tried giving up bread. So you think it's going to be awful and you'll be miserable the whole time. After a few weeks, you just don't even, wouldn't even occur to me. You know, I've been to France, like I was saying last week, and I was just watching people in the cafes eating their croissant and their baguette with the jam, and I can hand on heart, you know, that would have been me, but I can hand on heart say I did not want those things, because how I feel now is so much more precious than the momentary pleasure of my croissant, which would just leave me wanting to another one and another one and another one.
Right. But there was also this, I remember too, you know, one of the things, like when I work with people, one of the things that people say often is like, well, I'm so limited, food is so boring now, whatever. And I think, you know, when I was in the food, I ate the same 5 things on repeat anyways. It was so boring, right? It was like pizza, tacos, cheeseburgers, a sandwich, right? Like it was these, and now I'm like, you know, I eat so many different things. Like I can eat steak and Brussels sprouts for breakfast if I want, because I'm no longer like held to this. It must be a
A
bowl of
rule.
cereal and whatever it, you know, and so it's really interesting how like when we're in it, it's really hard to see, right, the forest from the trees kind of thing or whatever, where once you're out, you're like, oh, okay.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
right.
It
Everything's in
explains the
color
fruit.
now.
Also, I also say to people, I'm still a real foodie. You don't have to be not a foodie. I'm still a massive foodie. I love to cook. I just made comfy duck legs for my lunch, which is like duck legs slow cooked in lard. Now, actually, if you'd told me all those years ago that I could eat comfy duck legs cooked in lard, I'd have been joyous, because I obviously loved, I loved eating fatty things, alongside my sugary things. So, and like you say, straight steak. I mean, what's not to love? I eat a lot of steak. I love cooking things into weight. We're so lucky that our middle son is a butcher, a high-class butcher, who does all locally sourced, organically reared, beautifully kept and raised meat. So we have access to all the meats, and I cook them in all different ways. And so it's fantastic. And you just feel so well when you eat those, when you eat like that, sort of mentally. And he's a carnivore actually as well, because he noticed himself that he's absolutely at his best when that's how he eats. So lucky him.
I've tried it. It makes me a little batty. So I have to have a little bit of fruit. I have to have a little bit of vegetables. I am very meat forward, but yeah, full on carnivore. And I'm just like, I'm dying for celery or something, a fresh salad. So that's, I mean, I think that's just really important to highlight, right? Like we're so individual. And so what works for us, and so I just think it's neat.
Yeah, absolutely. It's important not to, I think that the other trap we fall into is the sort of perfectionist thing. So if you're going to do carnivore, I'm doing carnivore like Sean Baker, and I'm just going to eat steak, and that's going to be the answer. And then you can't, maybe, that isn't really sustainable, like say socially, or, for any of us. So I'm very, very carnivore adjacent, but I, like you, if I suddenly fancied a chicken salad, I would go ahead and have a chicken salad. That wouldn't be, I failed at being a carnivore. I would definitely, or if I'm out and about socially, I would eat some, and then just kind of see how I go, really see how I feel. So
So beyond the food, what do you do? So about 5 years ago, you're like, okay, it's addiction. It dawns on you. And we know with addiction, right, no matter what it is, that there's so much more to it than just the substance or the behavior, right? There's like this massive gaping hole, or 90% of the iceberg under the water, right? There's something that needs to be filled, or something, right, that needs to be addressed. And so I'm wondering, like, what do you do for your recovery for that aspect of it on a daily basis? Do you have some sort of routines? Are there things that are non-negotiables? They have to happen for you. Otherwise things get a little bit wobbly. Yeah.
Skewy.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And it's definitely about getting things like the dopamine and the serotonin in good ways. I'm pretty sure I'm one of those people with naturally low dopamine. I can really easily go into a slough where I'll just kind of sit around. It seems probably most people who know me goes, oh, I don't know how you do or what you do, but actually it's quite easy for me to go into a sort of demotivated slough of despair. So so I exercise every day in some way. So and not in a kind of crazy, again, not in a perfectionist, I have to do this or run them 10 miles a day or something. So I go to a boot camp, which is kind of basically weights and hit kind of training to music for middle-aged women, and we have the best laugh. So I've been doing that for I think about years now, and it's the one thing that I've really loved and stuck to, the local thing. So that's great. So I do that about 3 times a week. I do yoga once or twice a week. I think yoga's really good for those of us with kind of racy minds, because you're doing something meditative, but it's actually kind of active. So I'm not very good at just sitting and doing mindfulness, because I just can't do it. But if I'm doing something mindful, active, like yoga, that really is great for me. The other thing that I do is I knit and crochet a lot. I love color, and I love being a little bit creative. So and the repetitive movement is very it's mindful, but in a sort of, yeah. So I love to knit and crochet. So I do that that's mostly what I do in the evenings, if I'm, you know, having an hour off during the day. Love to read, love to immerse myself in a book as well. That's another way that I can kind of get out of my own head. If I haven't done the yoga or the boot camp, I go either running or walking with David. We live in the countryside. It's absolutely beautiful around here. So even if the weather's bad, we try and do sort of go a little jog around one of the paths, or he looks after a lot of land around here for wildlife. So say this evening we're going to go a little walk and look at the wildlife. So it's another like nice, active, mindful thing to do. So yeah, I think I used to hate exercise at school. I just thought it was the pits, and I used to always try and hide and get out of it. But I really now understand completely that for mental health, movement is one of the best things you can do. You always feel better for it. Brain growth factor, dopamine, serotonin. If you're exercising with other people, oxytocin, endorphins. You just get the lot, really. There's a really brilliant book called Spark, if people haven't read it, by a guy called Ratner or Ratney. Anyway, it's called Spark, and it's about the science of exercise and the brain. It's really, really well worth a read. And if you don't exercise, it'll convince you to do so.
I think so many of us have like childhood trauma, you know, I mean, little t at least, right? Around exercise. Like it was always this: eat less, move more, run the mile. I don't know if you guys do that in the UK, but certainly in the US, you know, we would have to do like this presidential test or whatever. And so we had to do like so many sit-ups and so many push-ups, and we had to climb a rope, and we had to run a mile, and we had to do all these things. And so it was just always like, you know, there were always the kids that were athletic that loved that, right? Like it was just another day for them. But then there were those of us that we were like, this just is not our jam. Like, this is not what we do. Yeah.
And particularly as a girl in a bigger body, I was always last at the cross country, and oh God, it really traumatized me, the whole PE thing. But then, yeah, I did get into, before I understood the whole addiction thing, I had already got into exercise. I did understand that. I got into it really, of course, as most of us do, as a sort of weight loss tool, but then at least it built the habit. And I do understand now. I absolutely don't do it for weight loss now, or look at how many calories I've burned or anything like that. I just do it for the mental health and physical health benefits, really. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I like that reframe. And that has certainly been the thing that's helped me because I used to refuse, like just flat out refuse. I'm like, if so-and-so who I know can look like that and eat like that and still look like that and doesn't exercise, then I shouldn't have to either, right? So it was almost like I would dig my heels in and balk against it, where now I'm like, you know, it's almost a meme now. Well, it is a meme now, right? People are like, going on a walk for my mental health, you know, and they're like, you know what I hate about it? It works, you know, or whatever. And it's true though. It's when we can frame it of like, this is more of self-care. This is literally something you do for yourself to get the serotonin, endorphins, dopamine, oxytocin, whatever it is that you need, you can get from walking outside for even just 10 minutes. It's this nice reframe, and it builds that momentum. Keep going.
Yeah, I love all that. It's making me think about how I love the whole evolutionary thing. And I think if we try and think like that, it helps to explain so much, and it gives you some ideas of what to do to make yourself feel better. So we evolved walking, running, trying to, shifting logs, building stuff, didn't we? Trying to catch prey, making stuff. That's what I think, I think things like knitting, or sewing, you're kind of using natural materials, or doing these repetitive actions that people would have done back in the day as we evolved. We would have been outside, we were very tribal, so we were kind of influenced by the people around us. And I think it just helps to understand, how you can be at your best in the modern world, really. So eat like a caveman, eat meat, repeat, and scrabble around for a few bits of old salad or tuber. Add that to your meal if you find it. Plenty, as much exercise as you can fit in your day. Find a positive tribe, so that that's the other part of the recovery, really, for me, has been not to isolate, but to connect with, obviously the community, other professionals, to be trying to help people and be in this community of people who are trying to recover. Just helps so much, because you're so immersed in it, it becomes part of your life. Whereas if you're the only one in your family or in your community, then you're the weirdo. Whereas if you're in the community, you're in the gang, running with the cool kids. So find your tribe, really reach out. There are people who have these same experiences, who are sort of walking this same journey. That makes a massive difference. So think about it in a sort of, how did we evolve? What would we designed, how were we designed to function, and what we're designed to eat? Literally, we were not designed to eat the kind of weirdy foods that exist now. If you do nothing else, just eat real foods that were sort of swimming, running, or growing recently somewhere, and haven't sort of diverted through some massive processing plant in the middle of I don't know where, and come out in a box. No, don't do that. That isn't natural. That's not, our bodies weren't designed to process that kind of stuff over millennia.
No, it's so true. And David Wiss and Nicola Vina, and there were several others wrote a paper about evolution and our brains, and like this whole state of food addiction and whatever else. I
need to read that. I haven't even read that.
Yeah. And after I read that, it definitely convinced me more that, people like you and I, we're actually not the weirdos. We are the ones who, like, our brains are just so prepared to survive, that we're like oversensitive to this inundated environment of food and fast cars and screens and technology, and just like, it just overdoes it because it's so sensitive to it. So we would be the ones, literally, that our tribe would look to be like, hey, she's hunting, go hunt. Follow her. She knows where to go. Yeah. Oh, she's starting a fire, do that. She's sleeping. All right. Follow what she's doing, So I think you're right. And there are lots of us out there. Find us, and beyond that, you do. So not only do you do those things for your daily thing, but you stay busy. You do charity work. You volunteer your services for donations to a charity. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So so that's why I said kind of retired, because it's good to keep. Have realized it's nice to have time off, isn't it? But it's good to keep have a routine and keep busy. That's better for me, because otherwise, I say, I go into a kind of some kind of weird slough where nothing happens. So so the public health collaboration is a lovely charity in the UK that I was involved from the beginning, and we're trying to promote the dissemination of good public health advice. So the sort of things that we're talking about, particularly around food, the kinds of food, to get the information out to the public of the benefit that can have for so many conditions: type 2 diabetes, obesity, mental health, blah blah blah. So the groups that Heidi and I've been running, we run those for a donation to the PHC. We do intensive weekends, and obviously we have to charge for those because we have to cover the accommodation, the food and everything, but any profits of those that goes to the public health collaboration as well, and speaker fees and things that I get would go to the PHC. And I wrote a little book called Fork in the Road. It doesn't always come out because it's blurred. There it is, Fork in the Road, in lockdown, and profits from that go to the PHC. And there's also a journal that's just come out, a Fork in the Road journal. So if people want to journal about their food addiction experience, there's a 100-day double spread book. Both are on Amazon, and all profits go to the public health collaboration. And the next project is workbook that you're going to be involved in once we've got this paper out.
Pretty exciting stuff. I know. One thing after another. There's so many things to do.
There's plenty of things lined up to do. That's right. That's what I like. So there's things coming in the future. And I'm very, very blessed. We get to go around the world to talk about the project, the type 2 diabetes project with David. So it's wonderful. We've met so many amazing people, and we get to go places just on the back of that. So,
well, I think what you're doing is amazing, and I just appreciate you and David for doing everything that you guys do. And I'm just happy to be on this journey with you. And thank you so much for sharing your story with us. Before you go, would you mind sharing something that you needed to hear when you first started this journey?
Something I needed to hear. I think the main thing is that the thing that made the most difference was understanding it as an addiction. Because once you've understood it as an addiction, then it's clear that the thing that's going to work is abstinence. So once I had a clear model, I mean, I'm a person that, like, if it makes sense to me and I've got a model, I'll just go ahead and do it. I don't have a problem. I don't actually have a problem with changing my behavior or trying something new or being motivated to do stuff. I just need to point me in the right direction. And I think I'd never been pointed in the right direction until I heard Bitten say it's an addiction and the treatment is abstinence. Like, right, okay. And if I start doing any of this weird stuff with any other foods, then the answer's the same. But I notice myself doing kind of addicty things. I go, oh right, okay, what's crept in here that I need to sort of work on with abstinence. So that was the absolute bedrock. And then yes, all of the recovery stuff as well, and the things you need to do to just to look after your recovery and your mental health and your abstinence. But I think that was the absolute turning point, is understanding it as an addiction with the treatment as abstinence.
Oh, beautiful. I love it. Thank you so much again for being here, Jen. And hopefully this project will get some traction.
All you do as well, because I mean, you're the same. You give so much of your time, and to the food addiction professionals, that's a wonderful thing that you've started, and I think will really take off as well. So thank you as well.
Oh yeah.
Namaste.
Right.
As they say.
Yes. All right. Thank you so much.